Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. Today we're going to talk about conformity. So we conform because we need to be a part of the village or the tribe. To be banished from the village or the tribe meant death. Back in the day, there were wild animals, there were other tribes. So humans need the group to survive. So therefore, we're going to behave with social norms because we don't want to be banished. So these are implicit or explicit, so they might be written, they might just be discussed, they might just be implied rules that apply to all the members of the group. And this is what is your acceptable behavior? What are the acceptable things for you to believe in or to do? So these social norms allow for smooth interaction day to day because they let us know how people are supposed to behave. And if you don't behave according to these social norms, then you'll be banished, you'll be kicked out of the group. And so groups will socialize new members into the group norms. When you arrive, they will let you know you have done something wrong or you're doing something right. So it's behave or be excluded from the group, which is painful and could result in death. When you violate the social norms, there's that danger, and no one wants to be banished. It feels horrible when you are socially banished. So, what happens if we don't follow the norms? Think of all the ways that you may or may not follow all the norms. Do you follow every rule in the school rule book? Have you even read the school rule book? Do you ever jaywalk, right? Did you ever walk across the street when you're not supposed to, or you don't walk at the corner, or you don't walk with the appropriate light? Well, we've broken a social norm. Do you behave differently in church than the way that you are going to behave at prom? Do you ever slurp your soda or your soup when you're in public? Do you ever walk the wrong way up or down the stairs? Do you ever face the back of the elevator? There are very simple ways that we can break social norms. Like these pictures are of nuns. We think of nuns behaving a certain way, and these nuns are breaking social norms. So social influence is the way that when we're with people, they attempt to change our attitudes or our behavior. And there's two different types of social influence. There's normative social influence, and this is why we go along with others, right? Why we go along with the social norms. We want to fit in. If we don't fit in, we might have FOMO, that fear of missing out. Again, social rejection is very painful. So we will conform at all costs to avoid that pain. So you might not be hungry, but your friend calls you and says, I'm going to go eat. And you're like, yeah, I could eat. I just ate, but I could eat. Right. So we tend to go to parties when our friends are going to parties. We tend to do things when other people are doing them. So some example is we might dress to fit a trend. Maybe flare jeans are in or skinny jeans are in, and we feel like if we dress this way, we will gain social approval. This can lead us to conform so that we can fit in and be liked and to avoid that social rejection. Then there's informational social influence. So we all have a need to evaluate the correctness of our opinion and the worth of our abilities. We have a strong desire to be right. We want to make sure that our actions are correct in all situations. So we kind of look around and see what others are doing, and we might conform to what they're doing. We assume that they have information that we don't have. And this is especially true in unfamiliar situations. Your first couple weeks at a brand new job, your first couple weeks at a brand new school, if you go visit another country, you join a new sport or a new hobby, we aren't really sure what to do in those situations. So we use other people and their social cues for information. We want to make sure we're doing things the right way. We don't want to be embarrassed, humiliated, laughed at. So, an example, if you go to a foreign country and you don't speak the language and you need to figure out which bathroom you're supposed to go to, sometimes in America, we put crazy signs on our bathrooms too. And you're like, I don't know, am I a little buddy or am I a buckaroo, right? I don't know. Am I a mermaid or am I a hen or a rooster here? So you kind of wait to see, well, where are the boys going and where are the girls going? And you determine which door is right for you. Maybe you're going to a really fancy party or a very fancy restaurant and there's multiple forks. And maybe you don't use more than two forks at your house and you're not sure what to do with all the extra forks or all the extra glasses or all the extra spoons. And so you kind of watch around the table and figure out, which is for the soup course and which is for the fish course and, what do I use first? You kind of watch to see which one do I pick up. Persuasion, we can persuade attitude or impressions. Now, there's an entire study about persuading people that combines psychology with economics. It's called behavioral economics. And it is how we use psychology to convince people to do all kinds of things, from voting for our candidate in politics to buying our product in sales and marketing. And they definitely know about this on all your social media platforms. They absolutely use this persuasion. So sometimes with persuasion, they want us to buy products that we don't need. I would say most of the products we don't need, but they have to convince us that we need them and make us desire them and make us want them so bad we're just thinking about that product. Sometimes they use authorities and experts. This Snickers bar is doctor recommended. Sometimes they use beautiful or famous people and athletes and movie stars and rock stars. Sometimes they use emotion, fear, and guilt and shame. So the advertisers want us to do three things. They want you to pay attention. Don't click off the message. Don't get snacks. Stay focused on the message. They want you to comprehend the message. It doesn't do any good if it's a clever ad and you didn't even understand what it was for. And you have to accept the message as the truth, right? If I use Axe body spray, I can be a ninja. That has to become truth for you in order for you to go buy that product. So the elaboration likelihood model is how we are forming these attitudes. We rewrite that as ELM. So how attitudes are formed and changed, there are two types. There's the central route to persuasion. So see the word central. You go right to the facts, go right to the logic, go right to the brain, right? The brain is at the center of the body. So you're going to go right to the brain. Facts, figures, logic, information. It's not superficial. Typically, the central route is going to last longer. So, like, more facts can sway or influence behavior. Nowadays, everyone's like, oh, we have the science, right? The second part is more fun, peripheral. Peripheral, remember, is the outside part of our body, but peripheral is kind of the outer way to get to a message. So this is superficial. It's funny, right? It's a lizard selling you car insurance. It's a puppy dog or a bear selling you toilet paper. It's a caveman selling you car insurance. There's catchy slogans, there's songs, there's jingles, they're funny, Doritos commercials, Super Bowl commercials. So this is actually faster. We make a snap judgment. Remember, we're using heuristics, and there's no thinking needed, and there's no facts involved. So since debates, political debates have gone on to TV, which was 1960, the politician with the best hair wins. And we tend to see that as the peripheral route. So it's a visual thing, it's a very quick decision, it's made very, very fast, and it's peripheral and it's surface, it's superficial. Now, this can lead us into compliance and also ways that we persuade people. So persuasion techniques is also a way of getting people to comply. So you change your behavior not because you're forced to. It has nothing to do with your pay. It has nothing to do with your job. Nobody forces you to. They just simply ask you to. During COVID, they just said, please wear a mask. And it was just a sign on a door. And people were like, okay. And they found their mask. Or please stop smoking. People were like, okay. And they put out their cigarettes. So we comply. Most of us comply most of the time. So these compliance techniques can also be called persuasion techniques because they are the ways that get us to, buy things and sign things and agree to things. We use these for sales. We use these for fundraising, even school fundraising. We use these when somebody gets you to send a donation, and they definitely use these when it's time for voting. So the first one is called foot in the door. You agree to a tiny small task, like I just got my foot barely in the door, and now a bigger request is going to come later. So you might ask your friend, hey, do you have number 7 done in math class? And then if they're willing to share number 7 with you today, then maybe next time you see them, they would share all the answers with you, right? So we're going to start with one, and then we're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger in our request. So we saw this being used during the Korean War. The U.S. prisoners of war were asked to perform small little favors, like, hey, just bring this folder down over there, or would you go pick up this food, or would you go do this? They treated the prisoners of war fairly well, and they started with these tiny small favors, and then they got bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually asking them to make statements about how well they were being treated. And at the end of the war, 21 prisoners of war actually decided to stay behind because they had been so convinced that they were being treated well and they were pretty happy with the way things were going. They actually decided to stay. So if you would have asked them at the beginning of the war, they never would have agreed. But with the foot in the door technique, they eventually decided that they were doing all right. Another study in your book, in California, researchers asked if they would install a large, poorly written drive carefully sign in the front yard. Like imagine a giant billboard that was really ugly in your front yard. Well, only 17% of people would agree to that. But then they went to another group of homeowners and they started small. And they said, look, I've got this little 3-inch, like it's a tiny little bumper sticker, and it says drive safe. Well, nearly all people agreed to that. It was a small request. And then 2 weeks later, they asked those people if they could put the really big, ugly sign in the front yard. And now 76% of those people agreed. So they started small, and as long as people agreed to the small request, 76 were willing to go on to the big request. The opposite is door in the face. Think about somebody slamming the door in your face. So this is the one where you start high and then you're willing to accept lower. Because we as humans, we feel guilty about saying no. We don't really want to disappoint you. We don't really want to say no. So we find a way to compromise with you and eventually give you what you wanted in the first place. So you might say to your parents, can I stay out till 2 a.m.? And they're going to say no. No, you cannot. But, well, how about 11? Can I stay out till 11? And that sounds so much more reasonable when you come back with that answer. They're like, okay, yeah, you can stay out till 11. You might ask, can I have $1,000? And they're going to say, no, are you kidding? You can't have $1,000. But could I have $10? Well, that sounds so more reasonable. Of course we can have $10. So the study they did for Door in the Face, Big Brothers Big Sisters needed volunteers. So they asked people, would you be willing to give 2 hours every single week for an entire year to volunteer with Big Brothers Big Sisters? Well, less than 17% of people agreed to that request. So then they asked another group, would you give 2 hours just one time at the zoo? Just one time, we're going to take a group of kids to the zoo. It's only 2 hours. 50% agreed, right? So they started really big and then made the request small, and people would agree to the second request. So let's look at the effects of group interaction. So we have the chameleon effect where we do tend to mimic each other. If somebody crosses their arms talking to you, you're going to cross your arms. We talked about this with mirror neurons. If they laugh, you laugh. If they yawn, you yawn. Um, we tend to mimic posture. We tend to mimic eating. We tend to mimic coughing. And all of this leads to conformity. Conformity is where we adjust our behavior to fit into social norms. Sometimes this is unconscious. We don't even know we're doing this. We want to meet a group standard because of real or imagined pressure. So where and how do we conform? Well, we conform in elevators. We conform in school. Have you ever disagreed with a teacher about an answer? Do you do it often? Did you do it once or twice in middle school? Like, how does that go over when you disagree about an answer? Well, this leads us to the 1956 Solomon Asch conformity study, a very famous study where he investigated social pressure and group conformity. And could he cause a group to make an individual person conform? So in this famous line experiment, he is going to use actors or, other students, we call them confederates. So he shows one participant a series of lines on cards, and he asks them to match the length of the line with 3 comparison lines, as you can see here in this example. Now, in this example, you see that the line at X very clearly should be B. But in a group of people, all the other people who are actors, they're in on it, they all say C. And when it comes around to the participant who was not an actor, the one that they were actually testing conformity on, they would change their answer. They would say, wow, it must be B. I must be getting it something wrong. I must not be seeing something right here. So the other participants gave deliberately a wrong answer and could cause conformity a majority of the time. So think about if you're sitting in maybe in a really difficult class, maybe it's a AP Physics or maybe it's a harder math class where the answer isn't all that easy and you're the only one in the class who got a different answer. Are you willing to question the teacher and the rest of the class if your homework answer was different than theirs? Because that's what the Ash conformity study was looking at. So why do individuals conform with a group? Well, again, this experiment used Confederates, it used actors, and it had mild deception. And then it had the three lines. So 36%, one third, would give the wrong answer every time, one third. Okay, so maybe that's not 100%, but that's still a whole lot of conformity if you can get one third of these undergraduate college kids to give the wrong answer when they plainly know they're giving the wrong answer. So the study highlighted the powerful influence of social pressure on conformity and demonstrated how individuals will go against their own judgment to conform with the group consensus, even though you know better. And how often do we do this in situations like when you see bullying happening or when you see something happening and you're like, oh, I really should not do this. I really should stand up for them or for this, but I'm just going to go along. So 36% of the test subjects gave the wrong answer because they really wanted to conform. However, here's what we noticed. If one person voiced a different opinion, then it freed up the test subject. The test subject was like, oh, okay, you questioned the teacher or you questioned the class. I can now escape conformity and I can also give what I think is the right answer. So it only took one person um, being a little bit different and voicing a different opinion to free up the conformity. And when debriefed, the subjects said they started to doubt themselves, or they thought they misunderstood the question, or maybe they didn't understand the point of what they were doing there. They thought that maybe they misheard. Later studies show that the tendency to conform is even greater if the group is larger. So if you're in a room of 300 people, or if you're in a room of 30 people, or if you're in a room of 3 people, we see the tendency to conform is greater with the more people in the room. If you're feeling like you have low self-esteem, or maybe it's a class you don't really feel like you're good at, they did see women were more likely to conform than men. Now, this was the 1950s. Do you think women would be as likely to conform nowadays? So, how can social influences impact the conformity? So, go back and look at the normative and informational social influence and see if you can find some answers about how that would influence conformity. So, what conditions would strengthen conformity? If you're feeling insecure or incompetent, it's not a great subject for you. If the group has 3 people or more, or they seem unanimous, everybody else got a different answer on their homework than you did, and it's unanimous, and you're the only one. If you really admire the group, you want to join the group. Maybe it's a fraternity or a sorority you really want to join, or it's a company that you really want to work for. You might be more willing to conform in the interview because you really want to be there. If you haven't made any prior commitment to the response, it's like no big deal whether you did or not. If you observe others in the group are watching you, if others in the group are observing your behavior, or the professor or boss is observing your behavior, and if your culture strongly encourages respect for authority, respect for social standards. And now you're ready for the next video.